had the right connections. And Daniel had those. I had been so blinded by my belief in hard work and fairness that I hadn't seen it. "You're telling me this was a favor?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The anger was bubbling up now, but I didn't know where to direct it. "It's not like that," he said, looking uncomfortable. It's just business. I'm sure you'll get another opportunity down the line. Don't take it personally." I stood there for a moment, trying to process what had just been said. Another opportunity? My whole career felt like it had just been yanked away from me, and he was telling me to move on? I turned and walked out of his office, my head spinning. I didn't know what was worse, losing the promotion or realizing how much of a game this really was. When I got home that evening, Emily was already there. She looked up from the couch as I walked in, and for a split second, I thought maybe she'd have something comforting to say. But when I spoke, her face fell. "Daniel got the promotion," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "He's the one, not me." Her eyes widened slightly, and she immediately looked uncomfortable, shifting in her seat. "I didn't know it would affect you like this," she said almost defensively. "It's just a job, Mike. Daniel and I have a history, but that doesn't mean it was personal." "How could it not be personal?" I snapped. "You know he and your boss are friends. You knew this would affect me." She shook her head, a small sigh escaping her lips. "I didn't think it would come to this. I never imagined things would play out like this." I couldn't stop myself from asking, "How much do you really know about this, Emily? About the role he's played in my life, in my career? Was this all some kind of plan?" She stayed silent, and that silence spoke louder than any words ever could. I turned away, my mind racing. What was I supposed to think? Was all my hard work meaningless? I had to wonder if this had always been about more than just the job. "Emily, what's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. It had been weeks since I got passed over for the promotion, and it felt like something was slowly eating away at the foundation of our relationship. She had been distant, more than usual, and I couldn't shake the feeling that she was hiding something from me. She looked up from her phone, her eyes avoiding mine. "What do you mean?" "You've been acting different," I said, sitting down across from her. "Ever since everything with Daniel and the promotion. You've been so cold, like you're avoiding me." She shifted uncomfortably, her fingers tapping nervously against the phone case. "I'm just stressed, with everything happening at work, with you, with us. It's a lot." I didn't buy it. There was more to it. I could feel it in the way she didn't meet my gaze, in the way her words didn't match her actions. "Is it just work?" I pressed, trying to keep the anger out of my voice. "Or is it something else?" She sighed, rubbing her temples. "It's nothing, Mike. You're overthinking things. I'm just trying to deal with everything. I have a lot on my plate." I leaned forward, my frustration growing. "I know you're not telling me the whole truth. It's not just work, is it? You and Daniel have been talking a lot lately. I see the messages. What's going on with that?" Her face went pale. She opened her mouth, then closed it, struggling to find the right words. Finally she spoke, but I could tell she wasn't being honest. "It's nothing. We've been talking, yeah, but it's just about our past, Mike. Just friendly conversations, nothing more." I could feel my heart drop. "Friendly conversations," I repeated, trying to process her words. "Is that what it is? Or is it something else?" She shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my gaze. "It's not what you think, Mike. You're making it more complicated than it is." But I wasn't convinced. The pieces were starting to fall into place. Daniel's sudden arrival at the company, his connection with my boss, the late-night phone calls I had overheard, and now this, her defensiveness. My doubts were growing, but she wasn't giving me anything solid to go on. The emotional distance between us felt like a heavy wall. It was hard to ignore now, harder to pretend everything was fine. The truth was out there, and I wasn't sure how to face it, but I couldn't keep pretending that things were normal when they weren't. I was sitting on the couch when I glanced at Emily's phone on the coffee table. I knew I shouldn't snoop, but something about the way she had been acting lately, the way she had kept things from me, made my gut twist. It was hard to shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Her phone buzzed, and the name on the screen caught my eye. Daniel. My heart stopped. I couldn't ignore it any longer. I picked up her phone, my hands shaking, and unlocked it. As soon as I saw the messages, everything came crashing down. They weren't casual texts. They were deep, personal, filled with things they had shared long ago. Words I never thought I'd see, expressions of feelings, promises, things that were never meant to be shared with me. I scrolled down, my breath growing shallow. They'd been in contact constantly, talking about the past, about what could have been, and the connection between them hadn't died. It had only gotten stronger. It was clear now. Emily and Daniel had rekindled their old affair. My mind raced. How had I not seen this? Daniel, the man who had taken my job, who had stepped into a position I had worked tirelessly for, was also the man who had taken the one thing I thought I had, her love, her trust. She had let him back into her life, and now I was left picking up the pieces of what was left. My chest felt tight, my throat dry, as the reality set in. I had been a fool. The betrayal wasn't just professional, it was personal. I had given everything to her, to us, and she had given it away to him. I couldn't keep quiet anymore. I had to confront her. I threw the phone down on the table and looked at her, my voice shaking with anger and pain. "Emily, what is this? What's going on with you and Daniel?" Her face went pale, and for a second she seemed like she was going to deny it. But the truth was written all over her. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she whispered, her eyes filled with guilt. It just did." I clenched my fists, fighting the tears, threatening to break free. "So you're telling me that everything we had, everything I believed in was a lie?" I said, my voice barely audible. She broke down then, her face crumpling in regret. "I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you. But the words didn't matter. The damage was already done." I stood there, feeling completely empty, unsure of where to go from here. She had betrayed me, and worse, she had done it with the one person who had already taken so much from me. The realization hit hard. I had no idea how to fix this, or if it was even worth fixing. I walked into the office that morning, but the weight in my chest made it feel like I was carrying bricks in my shoes. Daniel's smug grin greeted me as he sat behind the desk I had hoped would be mine. It was hard not to feel the shift, the coldness in the air, every time I passed him in the hallway. He wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. His new position was a badge of honor, one he wore proudly while I was left picking up the pieces of a career that was quickly slipping through my fingers. Every meeting felt like a battle. Daniel would chime in with suggestions, his tone laced with that superiority I hated. And when he made decisions that should have been mine to make, he would look at me as if daring me to challenge him. The worst part, I could feel it. My boss was backing him up, giving him more than I had ever been given. It didn't take long before I realized that my presence in the room didn't matter as much as it used to. It felt like I was invisible, like I had become a shadow in the office I once ruled. Daniel made sure to subtly remind me of that. "Mike, did you get that report I asked for?" he'd say, but the tone was always that casual, offhand remark, as if my contributions weren't even worth noticing. I hated that feeling, the feeling of being irrelevant in a place I had once thought was mine. The more it happened, the more I realized I was being pushed aside. The work that had once been mine to handle was now Daniel's domain. Even my own boss, who I had trusted, seemed to be aligning himself more with Daniel than with me. His answers to my questions became more clipped, his attitude colder. I started to wonder if this had been part of the plan all along. Was I ever really going to get the promotion? Or was it all just a setup for Daniel to take over, with my efforts as a mere stepping stone? I started to look into my rights at work, trying to figure out if I could do anything about the situation. Could I challenge this? Could I fight back? But the more I researched, the more I felt trapped. The thought of quitting crossed my mind, but I knew how much I had sacrificed to get where I was. Quitting wasn't an option, not without losing everything I had worked for. But as the days passed, the feeling of helplessness grew. I didn't know how much longer I could stand this. I sat at my desk, staring at the glowing screen in front of me. The job search page was open, but my mind kept drifting. Every part of me wanted to just walk away from it all, to pack up and leave the toxic atmosphere behind. But deep down, I knew quitting wasn't the answer. I had worked too hard to just let this situation take away everything I had built. Still, the thought of staying was becoming unbearable. Everything seemed perfect. I had a life I was proud of, a life I thought I would build with Emily forever. We were living in a cozy apartment with a steady routine. I'd come home from work every day, and Emily would be there waiting with a smile that never failed to make my heart skip. We had plans, vacations, home improvements, a future that was mapped out, or so I thought. I had a solid job, one I worked my ass off for. Every late night at the office, every extra hour spent working through weekends was leading to something. Or so I believed. When the announcement came, I was more than ready. A promotion had opened up and it felt like it was mine. I'd put in the effort, I'd earned it. It was the next step, the reward for all my hard work. I could already picture it, more responsibility, more money, and most importantly, a sense of accomplishment. Emily and I would celebrate, and this would be the moment I could finally prove to both of us that everything I was working for was worth it. I worked harder than ever in the weeks leading up to the announcement. Every conversation at the office, every presentation, every meeting, it was all leading up to this. I could almost taste it. Then the email came. I opened it with shaky hands, excitement bubbling in my chest. But when I read it, everything froze. Daniel, my wife's ex-husband, had been promoted instead. I sat there staring at the screen, trying to process the words. My mind raced. This couldn't be right. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. How did he get the job? I had been passed over for someone who had only just joined the company. The betrayal was sharp, like a punch to the gut, and I didn't know what to do next. I remember the day the promotion was announced like it was yesterday. I had been working towards this for months, putting in the extra hours, staying late, handling every project that came my way. It felt like the perfect time for me to take the next step in my career. My boss had hinted at it in the last few weeks, and everything seemed to be aligning. I was certain this job was mine. Then the email came. The subject line read, "Promotion Announcement." My heart raced as I clicked it open. I already had my victory speech ready in my head, how I would thank Emily, how she'd be so proud of me. But as I read the name in the email, everything froze. Daniel, Emily's ex-husband. How? He had only recently joined the company in a high-level position, and there he was, taking the promotion I'd worked so hard for. I couldn't wrap my head around it. How did this happen? I'd been here longer, put in the effort, and yet this guy, someone I barely even knew, other than the fact that he had been a part of Emily's life long before I came into the picture, was now the one in charge. I tried to keep my composure, but the questions kept swirling in my head. Why him? Why not me? Daniel wasn't even with the company long enough to know the ropes the way I did. I started asking around the office, and that's when I noticed something strange. Daniel had been spending a lot of time with my boss lately, more time than usual. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe they were just networking, or maybe Daniel was just trying to get to know the company. He was a charming guy, after all, with a way of making everyone feel like they were his best friend. But as the days passed, it became harder to ignore. The more I thought about it, the more I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The promotion was announced, and the next thing I knew, Daniel was in the position I'd hoped for. I felt sick to my stomach, and I couldn't understand it. Something didn't add up. Why had I been passed over for someone with so little experience in the company? Was I being played for a fool? I went home that night with a growing sense of betrayal, unsure of where things were going, but knowing I had to confront the truth. But what was the truth? I walked into my boss's office, trying to keep my anger in check, but it was almost impossible. My hands were shaking, and my mind was racing. I had worked tirelessly for months, and now, just like that, everything had been ripped away. Daniel had taken the promotion I had been waiting for. "Mike," my boss said as I closed the door behind me. He looked up from his desk, almost as if he already knew why I was there. "I know you're upset, but this decision wasn't easy." "Upset?" I said, my voice tighter than I wanted it to be. "I worked for this. I've been putting in the extra hours, taking on the tough projects. You know I deserve this position." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Look, Mike, Daniel is a close friend of mine, and there were personal reasons behind this decision. It wasn't just about your performance. Sometimes these things are about more than just who works harder." I froze. His words hit me like a ton of bricks. I had never expected this. It wasn't about who worked harder or who had more experience. It was about who. The idea of taking legal action crossed my mind. I'd read through the company's policies, trying to find some loophole, some reason to fight back. Could I challenge the promotion? Could I sue for being passed over because of favoritism? I wasn't sure, and the thought of diving into a legal battle felt daunting. The process would be slow, expensive, and emotionally draining. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized I didn't want to sit idly by while Daniel got away with everything. He had come into my life, taken my career, and now it felt like he was taking everything from me. I needed advice. I reached out to a few friends, hoping they could offer some perspective. They were all shocked by what had happened, and their reactions mirrored my frustration. "You can't let him get away with this," one of my friends said. "He's outplayed you at every turn. He took your job, now it's time to take him down." I didn't like the sound of that. It wasn't in my nature to fight dirty, to stoop to his level. But the more I heard their words, the more the idea started to take hold. Maybe Daniel needed to face consequences for what he had done. Maybe he needed to be shown that there were lines you didn't cross, that you couldn't take everything from someone and walk away without repercussions. But then there was the other side of me, the side that just wanted peace, the side that knew fighting would only drag me further into this nightmare. Revenge, I thought, would only consume me. Was I willing to give up my integrity just to bring him down? Could I live with myself if I became someone I wasn't? I ran my hands over my face, torn between the options. My anger pushed me one way, but my need to keep my dignity pulled me in the other direction. I was exhausted. What was the right choice? Would taking action really make me feel better, or would it just drag me into a deeper hole of resentment? I spent the next few weeks looking for a way out. The frustration, the anger, it all started to fade as I focused on rebuilding. I updated my resume, sending it out to every company I could think of. It wasn't easy, and the uncertainty of not knowing what would come next weighed heavily on me. But I knew staying in that toxic environment wasn't the solution. I needed to start fresh, somewhere I could feel valued again, somewhere I could prove to myself that I was capable of moving on. And then the call came. A company I'd applied to a few weeks before had reached out, and after a few interviews, they offered me a position. It wasn't the exact role I had hoped for, but it felt like a step in the right direction. I jumped at the chance. The first few days were nerve-wracking, meeting new colleagues, learning the ropes of a new job, but I could feel something change within me. For the first time in a while, I felt appreciated. My opinions mattered. I wasn't just a cog in the machine. I was part of a team that valued what I brought to the table. It didn't take long for me to realize that this was just the beginning. The job was everything I had been looking for, and more. My boss was supportive, and I found myself given more responsibility than I had expected. A few months in, I was offered a promotion, one I hadn't even considered. It was unexpected, but it was mine. I felt a sense of pride, something I hadn't felt in so long. The weight of the betrayal that had been hanging over me for months started to lift. I was finally on my way to building the career I had always wanted, but never had the chance to achieve before. Then I started hearing things. Mutual acquaintances from my old job began to tell me that Daniel was struggling. His position was under review, and his performance had been called into question. The same man who had come in and stolen what I worked for, the one who thought his friendship with my boss would keep him untouchable, was now facing the consequences of his actions. I wasn't sure how to feel about it. Part of me felt a strange sense of satisfaction, but the other part, the part that had grown stronger over the past few months, realized that I didn't need to seek revenge. Life had already started to pay him back in ways I could never have planned. I wasn't focused on him anymore. I was focused on what was ahead. The new job, the new promotion, the peace I had found, these were the things that mattered now, and I was finally free. I sat back in my new office chair, the weight of everything that had happened slowly lifting off my shoulders. I had moved on, or at least I thought I had, but now, in this moment of quiet, I realized just how far I'd come. The career I had built was no longer a reflection of what I had lost, but of what I had gained. I had walked away from the chaos and the resentment, and in return, I had found peace. I had been so focused on Daniel, on getting even, on proving that I was better than him. But now I understood something. Revenge wouldn't have healed anything. It would have only dragged me down further. All the anger, all the bitterness, It would have kept me tied to a past that I couldn't change. I didn't need to prove anything to Daniel. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. I had already proven my worth to myself. The truth was, I had to let go of the past. Letting go wasn't easy. There were days when I would catch myself replaying the moments of betrayal, the hurt, and the unfairness of it all. But then I would remind myself that my success and happiness were now in my hands. I didn't need to look back anymore. I had everything I needed to move forward. The job, the promotion, the sense of being valued. It wasn't just a career, it was a new life I had built for myself. Trust had always been a challenge for me. I had trusted the wrong people, and that had hurt. But now I knew what it meant to trust. Trust wasn't about relying on others to validate me or make me feel worthy. The most important trust was the one I had to place in myself. I trusted myself to make the right decisions. I trusted myself to handle whatever came my way. And that made all the difference. Looking at the future, I realized that everything I had been through had made me stronger. The betrayal had been painful, yes, but it had also taught me resilience. It had shown me what I was capable of, even when the world seemed stacked against me. I was no longer the person who relied on others for happiness. I was someone who had learned to stand on my own, and that I realized was worth more than any promotion, any victory. I had found peace, not because I had won, but because I had finally learned how to let go. And for the first time in a long while, I felt free. I never imagined I'd be here. I never imagined I'd face such a betrayal, one that would shake me to my core. Losing my job, losing trust in the people closest to me. It was hard, harder than I ever thought possible. But somehow I made it through. And now I'm standing on the other side, stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever. Life is never going to be perfect. We all face obstacles. We all face moments when things fall apart, when everything we've worked for seems to slip through our fingers. It's in those moments that we need to remember resilience is everything. The ability to stand back up, even when you feel knocked down, is what defines us. It's not about avoiding the hard times, but about finding the strength to keep going, even when the odds seem impossible. I know there are people out there who feel the same way I did, the anger, the confusion, the feeling of being powerless, but you're not alone. I want to share my story with you because I want you to know that you can come out stronger. I've been there, I've felt what you're feeling right now, and I can tell you from experience that it gets better. You don't need to wait for someone to give you permission to take control of your life. You have the power to move forward, to rebuild, to start fresh no matter what you've been through. If you've ever been betrayed, if you've ever felt like life was working against you, I want you to remember that this is not the end. It's the beginning of something new. So take that first step toward your own growth. Don't let the past define you. Use it as fuel to drive you forward. If my story has resonated with you, if it has given you a glimmer of hope, I encourage you to subscribe, like, and share. Let's keep the conversation going. Share your own stories of strength and overcoming obstacles. Let's inspire each other to keep moving forward. No matter what you've faced, you can rise above it. I believe in you, and I know you have what it takes.